Recently, I met two people that you rarely see in monasteries. One was about 4 months old, and the other was about 5 days old. Two babes. Babies are interesting. They're completely helpless. They have to learn everything. And they can't exist without their parent. They have to learn everything all through life, from walking, from crawling to walking, even to learning how to eat solid food. And in these Sundays after Pentecost, when we are learning how to be disciples of Jesus, this whole idea of parenthood came to mind. It's interesting that in the early church, many of the writings refer to us as being born from the open side of Christ as he died on the cross. In other words, they called Christ their parent, having given birth to us by his death and resurrection. So what do we learn if we think of ourselves as the children of the Christ? Well, first of all, we learn that we cannot even exist without him. As the beginning of St. John's Gospel reminds us, all things were created through him, and nothing exists that was not created through him. Secondly, we learn that we have to know and learn everything about life through him, especially as his disciples, as his babes, newborn of Christ. And we also have to learn, as children and babes learn gradually through the course of their life, that growing requires suffering, requires leaving some things behind and moving on to others. Just as all the disciples of Jesus that we read about in the scripture and in church history, like Jeremiah in the first reading today, who had to leave the past to move on if he was going to be a prophetic speaker for God. And we also learn that children become like their parents. Sometimes in human life that's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. But we all have the DNA of our parents, and so we carry on into the future the lives of those who have given birth to us. And that, of course, is what discipleship is all about, isn't it? It's carrying the life of Jesus, the death of Jesus, and the resurrection of Jesus into the future. We are bearers of the good news. We are the ones who encapsulate the good news in our very lives, as the first hymn today said to us. We have to grow up in Jesus and move forward in our history and carry the life and death of Jesus forward in history. And this requires that we learn from him. As he said, learn from me. Learn how to face life, respond to life as I did. And how did he? Whenever Jesus came upon anything that was wrong, he tried to right it. Whenever anything that he encountered was ill, he cured it. Or whenever he met sin, he forgave it. When he met the dead, he raised them to new life. And this is what discipleship is. It's meeting the things of life that are not of God and making them of God by receiving them into ourselves with mercy, forgiveness, and love. We have the DNA of Christ, but we have to let that DNA work itself out in the way we respond to our life situations. That's what discipleship is. It's not just for us that Jesus died on the cross, it's for all. And that gift of self has to be carried on through us to the world in which we live, so that all things will be redeemed in him who gave us birth.